The lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel gleamed like a cathedral of luxury, polished marble floors, gold accents on the railings, and chandeliers that shimmered like frozen fireworks. Zoe Johnson, dressed in a crisp housekeeping uniform, silently mopped near the concierge desk, her earbuds discreetly tucked away. The hum of guests, heels clicking, and distant jazz piano filled the air. She moved quietly, respectfully, like a shadow. Then her phone rang. She froze. Rule number 1 for Manager Richards: no personal calls during working hours, especially not in guest areas. But Zoe's heart leapt when she saw the caller ID. It was the University of Amsterdam. Her breath caught. After 6 failed attempts to secure a scholarship for her master's in linguistics, this call could mean everything. Just one moment, she told herself. She ducked behind a large potted plant beside a marble column and answered in a hushed voice. Zoe Johnson. A Dutch voice greeted her, Professor Van Ton. Without hesitation, Zoe responded fluently, her pronunciation sharp, musical. They spoke about her missing motivation letter, about deadlines, about qualifications. That's when she felt it, the stillness. Zoe looked up to find the lobby unnaturally quiet, the energy shifted. Just a few feet away stood Richard Coleman, the billionaire owner of the Grand Plaza chain, flanked by Manager Richards, whose expression was twisted in fury. Zoe's heart pounded. She ended the call quickly in Dutch. Ik bel je later Tarek. Manager Richards stepped forward. Johnson. In my office. Now. The walk to the basement office was a corridor of judgment. Colleagues looked away, or looked on smugly. Zoe, the only black woman in housekeeping with a college degree, had just been seen breaking the most sacred rule. Once inside, Richard slammed the door shut. No phones. No foreign languages in the lobby. You embarrassed us in front of Mr. Coleman himself. Zoe swallowed hard. It was Dutch, she corrected automatically, then instantly regretted it. Richard sneered. I don't care if it was Klingon. You're assigned to the convention center bathrooms for 3 months. Maybe there, you can speak all the languages you want. It was a punishment. Everyone knew it. The bathrooms after corporate events were double shifts, triple mess, and 0 overtime. You may go, Richards added coldly, and be thankful you're not fired. That night, Zoe returned to her tiny shared apartment, collapsed onto her mattress, and stared at the framed degree from Georgetown on her peeling wall. 6 years of cleaning rooms, saving every penny for grad school, sending resumes, enduring rejection. She cried quietly. The next morning, she arrived early, on time, in uniform, focused. Then something strange happened. Zoe Johnson called the receptionist. HR wants to see you. Now. HR. On the top floor. Zoe rode the executive elevator, eyes cast down, surrounded by suits discussing stock prices and mergers like she didn't exist. In HR, the director greeted her formally. Please take a seat, Ms. Johnson. Zoe prepared for the worst. A write-up. Maybe termination. But instead. Mr. Coleman would like to meet with you. Now. Zoe blinked. The owner? Yes. Inside the massive corner office, Richard Coleman sat behind a desk bigger than her entire apartment. His demeanor was calm, but his eyes held curiosity. Dutch. French. Italian. Mandarin. Correct? He asked, flipping through her personnel file. Zoe's mouth went dry. Yes. How did you? I heard you yesterday. Then asked HR for your file. Honors in linguistics. Fluent in 6 languages. And for 6 years, you've cleaned bathrooms in my hotel. Why? Zoe took a breath. I applied. 47 times. Internal transfers. Always denied. By whom? Manager Richards. Director Whitmore. Coleman wrote down the names silently. Interesting. Whitmore constantly complains we don't have enough multilingual staff. He paused, then leaned forward. A Dutch-Chinese trade conference begins tomorrow. I need someone fluent in both languages, someone who understands cultural nuance. Zoe raised an eyebrow. To clean their rooms? Coleman chuckled softly. To be the international relations coordinator. Temporarily. Salary, $5,000 a week. Starting now. She nearly dropped her purse. Why me? Because I heard how you speak. Because your resume says everything I need. And because something smells wrong in this hotel, and I want the truth. Zoe walked out of Coleman's office in a daze, clutching the freshly printed badge that read, Zoe Johnson, International Relations Coordinator. Just yesterday, she had been scrubbing guest bathrooms with rubber gloves. Now, she had full system access, a salary 3 times what she made in a month, and a private office on the executive floor. The irony wasn't lost on her. As she stepped into the elevator, 2 executives glanced at her badge, then at her face. Their surprise morphed into polite smiles, the kind of smiles she'd never received in uniform. As the doors closed, she caught sight of Manager Richards walking out of the restroom. Their eyes locked. The woman blinked twice, confused. Johnson, what are you? Working, Zoe said smoothly. Ms. Richards. Direct appointment from Mr. Coleman. Richards froze. Her lips parted but no words came. Zoe walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks. In her heart, she didn't feel triumph, only clarity. And clarity had its own power. The next few hours moved fast. In HR, Zoe Williams, a newly hired analyst, met her with a knowing smile. Finally, she whispered as they completed Zoe's transfer paperwork. I saw your file when I first started. I've been wondering why someone with your resume was in housekeeping. Zoe raised an eyebrow. I even tried to ask Whitmore, the analyst added, but he shut it down. Fast. Zoe nodded. She had known, deep down, that something bigger was at play. It wasn't just oversight. It was systemic. That afternoon, as Zoe settled into her new office and began reviewing the logistics of the upcoming conference, she noticed something deeply troubling. The translated welcome packet for the Chinese executives was riddled with cultural and linguistic errors, subtle misuses that, in formal business settings, could be considered offensive. One translation described the executives as honorable guests of the Red Harmony, a phrase that, in certain dialects, carried militaristic undertones inappropriate for corporate diplomacy. Zoe immediately opened her laptop, redesigned the materials from scratch, and began retranslating everything using the correct tone, syntax, and formal etiquette she had mastered in her applied linguistic studies. She was halfway through the packet when she sensed someone behind her. It was Coleman. How did you know those were wrong? He asked calmly. Zoe didn't flinch. The previous translation used overly poetic structures common in propaganda-era language. It's culturally inappropriate in modern Chinese business. Whitmore told me we hired the best, Coleman muttered. He hired someone, Zoe said carefully, without verifying credentials. These aren't just mistakes, they're liabilities. Coleman's eyes narrowed slightly. He nodded once and left the office. That evening, Zoe found herself walking alone through the conference setup area, clipboard in hand. She passed by event planners, caterers, and technicians rushing to finalize the space. Everyone seemed to move around her, none realizing that the woman in heels and blazer had once vacuumed the carpets they were now rolling out. Near the ballroom, she noticed a name tag. Ashley Whitmore. The niece. She was huddled at a side table with printouts, the original faulty translations. Zoe moved in closer, unnoticed, and took a quick photo with her phone. Her chest tightened. They weren't just trying to erase her corrections. They were trying to replace them, again. That night, Zoe opened a folder she had kept for years. It contained every rejected internal application, every email confirming receipt, every copy of her resume, each one ignored, red-stamped, or brushed off. Then, she opened a new file. Title: Patterns of Discrimination at Grand Plaza Hotels, Internal Memo. It was time to stop surviving. It was time to start exposing. Zoe barely slept that night. She sat by the window of her small apartment, now cluttered with documents, photos, and digital screenshots. A web of evidence began forming, thread by thread. Hiring patterns. Promotion denials. Invoices to Whitmore Translations LLC. Every thread pointed to something far more sinister than personal bias. It was a system. A machine built to keep people like her invisible. By sunrise, Zoe had compiled everything into a single, encrypted drive. She tucked it into her bag and slipped into her blazer, the one she'd bought secondhand for a scholarship interview that never happened. But this time, she walked out the door not as a hopeful applicant, but as a force. Down in the Grand Plaza ballroom, the air buzzed with anticipation. Day 1 of the Dutch-Chinese Trade Conference. Executives in tailored suits glided across marble floors, sipping imported espresso, talking about partnerships, tariffs, and cross-market ventures. Zoe was everywhere. In the background, greeting Dutch delegates in flawless Dutch. Guiding Chinese CEOs with precise Mandarin, offering culturally appropriate gestures of respect. She floated between worlds, effortlessly. And people noticed. Especially one. A Dutch businessman, tall and gray-haired, studied her with a look of faint recognition. As Zoe handed him a revised agenda, he leaned in. "Excuse me, are you the Zoe Johnson who published that paper in the Journal of Applied Linguistics? The one on code switching in East-West negotiations?" Zoe blinked. "Yes. How did you?" "I've cited that work twice," he beamed. "Brilliant thinking. You're the reason I restructured my firm's entire China approach. May I introduce you to a few colleagues?" Zoe's heart skipped. He wasn't just being kind, he meant it. Across the ballroom, Thomas Whitmore watched the interaction with barely concealed discomfort. The smile on his face didn't quite reach his eyes. That evening, Zoe walked the upper hallways, heels echoing against quiet marble, heading to her office when she saw something. Ashley Whitmore, again. She was standing at a printer, quickly gathering documents marked, confidential, final contract translations. Zoe's gaze swept the top sheet. The same flawed text. Same offensive phrasing. Same errors. Zoe pulled out her phone and took photos again. This wasn't just sloppiness. It was willful sabotage. The next morning, Zoe stood at Coleman's door again. He looked up as she entered, no surprise in his eyes this time. "Bad news?" he asked, gesturing to a chair. She sat, opened her laptop, and turned it toward him. "She's still submitting her niece's work. These are new documents, freshly printed. The errors could cause a diplomatic breakdown. And," she pulled out a flash drive, "I have the payment records. Ashley's company has received over $300,000 across 2 years. Triple the market rate. And she's not certified. I confirmed with Peking University, they've never issued her a Mandarin certification." Coleman's jaw tightened. "Are you absolutely certain?" "I have screenshots. Email threads. Time-stamped surveillance logs. I even have the fake certificate's metadata, created in Photoshop. Sir, this has been going on for years." Before he could respond, Zoe from HR rushed in. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Coleman, but I found something." She handed him a binder. "Hiring records," she explained, voice steady. 5 years. "There's a pattern. Repeated rejections of highly qualified candidates. Most of them black, Latino, or from Asian backgrounds. Most of them female. Some even internal referrals, buried. Coleman flipped through it. Page after page. His expression was unreadable. Then, his phone buzzed. He answered. "The Dutch are ready to sign," said a voice on the other end. "But they've flagged inconsistencies in the Mandarin sections." It was Whitmore. Coleman ended the call without a word. He looked up at Zoe. "Come with me." The executive auditorium on the top floor of the Grand Plaza Hotel had never been this full. Every senior manager, director, and department head had been summoned, without notice. Along the front row sat the Dutch and Chinese business delegates, murmuring in confusion, some flipping through translation packets. Zoe stood just behind the curtain, her palms cold, her heart steady. Beside her, Richard Coleman adjusted his cufflinks and gave her a quiet nod. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," she replied. The lights dimmed. The CEO walked to the podium, face unreadable. The room hushed instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice calm but heavy. "What I am about to say will redefine this company, not just this property, but our entire structure." A few puzzled glances exchanged. Whispers died down. "For years, we have marketed ourselves as a global leader in hospitality. But we've failed, in ways most of us haven't seen. Or chose not to see." Behind him, a large screen lit up. A presentation began, charts, graphs, and names. Slides compared employee qualifications to actual positions held. Names of overqualified minority staff were shown next to underqualified hires in managerial roles. Next came contracts, translation companies tied to internal staff, invoices at inflated prices, certifications exposed as fraudulent. In the final slide, Ashley Whitmore and Thomas Whitmore. Company ties. Total payments, $312,850. Verified credentials, none. The room was silent. Coleman spoke again. "This is not about one mistake. It's about a culture of exclusion. A system built to keep talent buried beneath uniforms, like the one worn by Dr. Zoe Johnson for the past 6 years." Gasps echoed. Zoe stepped forward. Her old housekeeping ID flashed on screen, next to her Georgetown diploma, her 6-language fluency, and a list of her international publications. "She applied for internal transfers 12 times, Coleman said. All denied. Not because she was unqualified, but because those in power refused to see her worth." Heads turned. Richard sat frozen. Whitmore stared blankly at the floor. "As of today," Coleman declared, voice rising, "Thomas Whitmore is terminated for cause. Effective immediately. Sarah Richards is suspended pending further investigation." Silence. Then slow, scattered applause. Then a wave of it, from the back of the room, from the support staff, the cleaning crew, the kitchen supervisors, those who had always clapped silently, unseen. Zoe stepped to the podium. Her voice was clear. "Some of you knew me as a cleaning lady. But I was also a linguist. A researcher. A woman who applied, and was denied. Over and over." She paused, letting the silence settle. "But today is not about me alone. It's about every person in this room, and beyond, who's been told they're too much, or not enough, because of who they are. Today we begin again." The room erupted in applause, this time louder, raw with emotion. Behind her, Coleman returned to the mic. "I am proud to announce that Dr. Zoe Johnson has accepted the role of Global Director of Internal Communications, overseeing all multilingual operations in our international properties." People rose from their chairs. Some cried. Some hugged. Zoe looked out over the crowd, her eyes stopping at the back, where the cleaning staff stood in uniform, clapping like their lives had just been rewritten. They had. 6 months later, the skyline of Manhattan shimmered outside Zoe Johnson's new office on the 32nd floor of Grand Plaza headquarters. A bronze nameplate on the door read, Dr. Zoe Johnson, Vice President of Diversity and International Relations. The desk was spacious. The salary, 5 figures monthly. But Zoe hardly thought about the money. Her power now lay in what she could change. That morning, her assistant, also named Zoe, the HR analyst who once helped uncover the corruption, poked her head in. They're ready for you. All regional managers are on the line. Coleman's already in the boardroom. Zoe rose, collected her notes, and walked toward the conference room with the calm authority of someone who had earned every inch of ground beneath her heels. Inside the executive boardroom, all eyes turned to her. Coleman gave her a respectful nod. Let's begin, Zoe said, plugging in her presentation. The title slide appeared. Invisible Talent, Pilot Program Review and Expansion Proposal. She turned to the screen. 6 months ago, we launched a program to identify overlooked but qualified employees throughout our hotel chain. We started small. Internal surveys, talent audits, confidential interviews. Slide after slide, she laid out the results. 147 employees identified with advanced skills in language, finance, management, or tech, currently working in low-tier roles. 83% of them were people of color, immigrants, or women. 12 had advanced degrees. 9 were fluent in 3 or more languages. Many had applied internally for promotions, rejected dozens of times. The financial impact was equally stunning. Outsourced translation costs, down 78%. International guest satisfaction, up 42%. Internal retention, highest in 5 years. Zoe clicked to the final slide. And we're just getting started. She paused, letting the weight of the numbers sink in. I propose we expand this across all properties, globally. And add a mentoring clause. Anyone promoted through this program will be responsible for mentoring others, ensuring the ladder doesn't disappear after they climb it. Coleman nodded slowly, pride in his eyes. That was your first condition when I offered the promotion, he said. Not just to fix your story, but the entire system. Zoe gave a small smile. We can't just patch a broken road and call it a highway. Meanwhile, across the country, Sarah Richards, once feared housekeeping manager, was watching the live company broadcast from a second-rate hotel in Sacramento. She had avoided termination by accepting a demotion. Now she managed laundry. Every day, she walked past younger, sharper employees, most of them minorities, now being fast-tracked into leadership. And she knew, the world had moved on without her. Back in New York, Zoe ended the presentation with a personal story. When I was young, my mother cleaned hotel rooms just like I did. She had a college degree. She never got a job in her field. She used to say, Zoe, no matter how invisible they make you feel, your worth is not up for debate. Zoe paused. My mother passed away believing certain doors would never open for people like us. She didn't live to see this moment. But I have. The room was silent. Several executives discreetly wiped away tears. Zoe continued, her voice steady. The true strength of a company isn't how much it earns, but how much potential it unleashes. For decades, the hospitality industry has buried brilliance under uniforms, accents, and assumptions. It ends here. Coleman stood and began to applaud. One by one, the room followed. A wave of applause rippled through hundreds of satellite employees watching remotely, chefs, clerks, housekeepers, some crying, some simply stunned to see someone like them at the helm. Later that day, a thick envelope arrived on Zoe's desk. It was from the University of Amsterdam, and inside, a letter from Professor Van Ton. He had followed her journey since that fateful call in Dutch. They were now offering her a visiting professorship in applied sociolinguistics. Zoe smiled. Ironically, she thought, none of this would have happened if Richards hadn't punished her that day. If she had just been given a warning, she might still be cleaning toilets with a PhD on the wall. She closed her eyes and exhaled. This wasn't about revenge. This was about restoration. That weekend, Zoe launched a scholarship fund for hotel employees and their children, funded in part by her salary. The first recipient? The daughter of her former colleague from housekeeping. A bright girl who dreamed of studying hospitality management. The circle had closed. But the movement was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the day Zoe Johnson stood in front of the Grand Plaza Executive Board and reshaped history with a single phrase, "We begin again." What started as a silent act of defiance, a woman answering her phone in Dutch while mopping a marble floor, had become a tidal wave across the hospitality industry. Now, that wave had a name. The Invisible Talent Initiative had officially expanded across 42 properties, with more than 200 employees promoted or transferred into roles matching their true qualifications. The program had become a case study in business schools, praised by economists, diversity advocates, and even government labor agencies. But for Zoe, it was never about recognition. It was about building what had never existed for people like her, a permanent pathway. One Friday afternoon, as she prepared for a keynote speech in Washington, D.C., Zoe took a moment to herself in her office. The window stretched high above Manhattan. On the wall behind her, a framed photo of her mother sat beside a certificate from the University of Amsterdam. Then came a knock. It was Zoe Williams, her assistant and former HR analyst. "The student group from Georgetown is here. They asked if you'd speak with them before the tour." Zoe smiled and stood. Of course. Downstairs, a small group of undergraduates, all aspiring professionals of color, stood waiting in the lobby. They had read her story in The Atlantic. Watched the interviews. But nothing could prepare them for standing face to face with her. "You're Dr. Zoe Johnson," one of them whispered. She extended her hand. "Call me Zoe." They laughed nervously. As they walked through the executive halls, Zoe pointed out rooms, systems, histories, then paused at the back entrance to the ballroom. "This," she said, "is where the staff used to enter. Where I used to enter." She let the silence speak. "Now," she continued, "we use the front door. And we bring others with us." That night, as she left work, Zoe passed a woman in a housekeeping uniform waiting for the bus. She looked exhausted, shoes worn thin, hair frizzed from humidity. But she clutched a tattered book on hospitality law. Zoe stopped. "Hi," she said. "May I ask what you're reading?" The woman looked up, startled. "Oh, it's just something I'm trying to learn. I've always dreamed of working in guest services, but, well." Zoe smiled. "What's your name?" "Lana." "Well, Lana," Zoe said, handing her a card, "come see me Monday morning. No promises, but I think we may have room for someone like you." Lana stared at the card, then back at her, mouth slightly open. "You're her. You're Zoe." "I was just like you," Zoe said softly. "And someone finally saw me. Now I see you." The following week, Zoe delivered her keynote at a global hospitality summit in Washington, D.C. Her speech was simple, and it ended with this: "True justice isn't just firing those who discriminate. True justice is building systems where discrimination has nowhere to hide. Where brilliance doesn't need permission to shine." The room rose to its feet. Later that year, Grand Plaza's Internal Academy opened its first physical training center, named after her mother. The Lydia Johnson Center for Inclusive Leadership. Its mission, to educate, empower, and elevate overlooked talent in the hospitality industry, and beyond. On the first day of the new semester, Zoe walked through its doors, the hum of possibility in the air. She watched as students, maids, janitors, interns, receptionists, took their seats with hope in their eyes. She turned to the wall where her mother's name was engraved in bronze. "I did it, Mom," she whispered. "And I'll keep doing it. For every daughter, every mother, every person who was told they weren't enough." Behind her, the class waited. She smiled, stepped up to the podium, and began.